With hundreds feared dead, it could be the worst tragedy ever in the Mediterranean Sea. Nine human smuggling suspects are being held pending trial after a migrant boat sinks off the Greek coast. While protesters march in Greece against their country's migration policy, reports emerge the Coast Guard may have ignored SOS signals. So who's really to blame for the disaster? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the Greek migrant tragedy. Well, it is the worst tragedy in the Mediterranean Sea this year, and it could be the worst ever. 104 people have been rescued from a boat overflowing with migrants and asylum seekers off the coast of southwestern Greece last week. More than 80 people are confirmed dead, but that's expected to rise as survivors say the vessel was carrying more than 600, mostly from Pakistan, Egypt, and Syria. The 20-plus meter-long fishing boat started its journey in Libya and was supposed to finish in Italy. It sank off the Greek coast in some of the Mediterranean's deepest waters. Greece is still searching the area, though the chance of finding more survivors is slim. And for those who have survived, the emotions are hard to describe. 18-year-old Syrian Mohammed Hadoud was reunited with his brother Fadi 4 days after being rescued.
Now is 18 year. I have in Libya almost 2 years. Yeah.
How do you feel?
Sorry.
Well, Greek authorities have arrested 9 Egyptian men who face charges that include participation in a criminal organization, manslaughter, and causing a shipwreck. They all deny any wrongdoing and claim to be migrants themselves. Meanwhile, serious questions are being raised about Greece's lack of action to rescue the struggling vessel. Officials in Athens say the passengers refused any help and insisted on proceeding to Italy. According to human rights groups, the Greek Coast Guard might have ignored SOS signals from the boat, while some survivors are accusing Greek authorities of being directly involved in the accident. Tracking data uncovered by the BBC shows the boat was stationary for hours before sinking, and 2 boats delivered supplies to the boat in that time. Today, hundreds of protesters in Greece are protesting their country's migration policy, but the UNHCR says unless the root cause changes, this will continue to happen.
People will keep on going on perilous journeys. When they leave their country and a situation of persecution or war, they will find ways to move. The longer and especially the sea journeys are so dangerous. So yes, if people are forced to take these routes in this way and being exploited under these conditions, we will continue to have such deadly incidents.
Now, what caused the sinking is, of course, still under investigation, but what we do know is that hundreds have drowned, even while the Greek Coast Guard was in the immediate area. Well, joining me now to debate what's happened, as well as Greece's and Europe's migration policy, are from Winchester, UK, Stephen Woolfe. He's a former member of the European Parliament and currently the director of the Center for Migration and Economic Prosperity. From Mytilene, Greece is Ines Avelas. She is the head of strategy for the advocacy team at Fenix. It's a humanitarian legal aid organization. And from Athens is Vassilis Kerasiotis. He is a human rights lawyer and director of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Thanks all so much for being with us. Vassilis, I'll start with you, and let's look at the disaster itself and the fact that the Greek Coast Guard is claiming the boat was fine and simply en route to Italy, even though they took pictures of the boat unmoving, overcrowded, and then we've seen tracking data that shows the boat wasn't moving for hours. How could there be such a discrepancy?
In fact, as we see in the pictures, this is the legal notion of boat in distress. So, in my opinion, it seems that the Greek coastal authorities, despite the fact that this terrible incident has taken place not in the territorial zone of Greece, of course, but in a zone where Greece has search and rescue competence, it seems that the coastal authorities either have undermined how important was the danger, or they didn't act according to protocols and according to international law conventions. They didn't organize a search and rescue mission.
They broke the law.
This is under investigation. We cannot predict, but we cannot predict the outcome of this investigation. To my best of knowledge, a chief prosecutor from Supreme Court has taken this investigation. We'll see the results of this, and hopefully we can wait and see.
Okay. Let me turn to Ines, because Ines, as you know, this is a country that has actually tried to criminalize life-saving aid workers assisting migrants and asylum seekers at sea. And in 2021, Greece actually passed legislation that made it almost impossible for NGOs to meet registration requirements. Greece has always said, yes, it's strict, but it's fair. But effectively, as far as we understand, there are really no more volunteer search and rescue operations anymore. Would that have potentially avoided a tragedy like this if those volunteer organizations were out there in force as they were previously?
Mm-hmm. It's difficult to predict exactly what could have happened if the circumstances were different, but it is possible to say that in consequence of the measures taken by the Greek government and supported by the European Union, the search and rescue missions made by civil society organizations simply disappeared from the Aegean Sea and from the SAR area of Greece. And we believe, as Fenix, that this has led to an increase of the number of deaths and the number of shipwrecks and other violations at the sea or at the borders, not just in sea, but also at the land borders.
Okay, let me turn to Stephen. Stephen, given what you've seen and your expertise in migration, irregular and regular, what do you think actually happened here?
Well, what I think is a failure of the governments of the European Union and indeed the rest of the world not to recognize that there needs to be substantial change to the framework and the international framework of immigration, asylum globally. So I would suggest that, first of all, there needs to be an amendment to the UN Convention on Refugees that starts to deal with the modern issues, which is genuine asylum seekers who are being, unfortunately, mixed in with illegal migration, as the European Union said within the past 6 years and many times since, that about 60% of all those coming into the EU are actually economic migrants. So until all governments start to look at that and then work together and recognize that this is an international issue with immigration traveling the globe, 3.5 million into the United States, that people smugglers and gangs are making in the region of 1.8 to 2.5 billion a year, profiting from this, then these situations will continue to occur, and the tragedies will continue to occur as well.
But do you really think a better legal framework between the EU and the Western countries that are receiving these kinds of irregular migrants and asylum seekers, a better legal framework would actually just deter people? Because people are desperate. They're going to come, whether they're economic migrants or whether they're fleeing war. So they need to be, their lives need to be protected. That's the bottom line.
Well, I think all lives need to be protected, and those are lives as those of those people who are seeking to leave for economic reasons. their own countries because they're just poor, to the poor people who live in the European Union and were impacted by this adversely, as every study always shows that the lower and medium income individuals are always impacted at the worst, not the higher end income earners of Western nations. And of course, then you get the negative pushback against genuine asylum seekers who are fleeing war and terror. And so governments have responsibilities internationally to those fleeing issues such as war and terror, to those looking after their own. And why an international framework needs to start considering this is whether we just junk the whole UN Convention on Refugees and say it's now time to allow every asylum seeker and applicant into the EU and the top 20 countries that receive most of them, excluding Pakistan and Iran.
Okay. I mean, Ines, are there some feasible answers in Stephen's response there? Or are the root issues here still being neglected?
I think there are here some issues being neglected. And just to also give some numbers, for example, here on the islands, on the Aegean islands, the recognition rate, so the percentage of people receiving international protection is over 86%. So the majority of these people are, despite all the restrictions on the access to asylum, are receiving international protection. But independently of that, I think the moment to examine an asylum application cannot be done at sea. So the search and rescue missions should occur independently of what was the reason behind the people flee their country of origins. So, and exists international framework and European framework to respond to these situations. And we have agencies and funds for this type of situation. For some reason, Frontex is currently the EU agency with the biggest budget in the European Union. So there is no lack of funding.
Okay. Vassilis, let me ask you, because go ahead if you had a comment.
I was saying that we have to take into consideration the simple fact that there are no safe procedures in Greek legal, in European common asylum, European system. In fact, in order to proceed with the asylum application and the asylum procedures and reception conditions, each one of these asylum seekers should try to enter the European territory. And given the absence of any legal route, I don't know how this continuous failure of common asylum European system will continue like this. The regular border crossings are through smuggling networks, obviously, are the direct result of absence of any legal route in the European territory.
Okay. So, Ines, I can see you agree. Stephen, I mean, again, we're back to the point that there are no safe legal ways for people that have legitimate asylum claims in particular to get to safe countries. And so then you have nations like Greece kind of taking their own measures. And we need to address a little bit, and Ines, I'll put this to you as well, the fact that there is a specific fear of Greek authorities at sea. There's also some suspicion now that it is possible that this boat said it wasn't in danger because it was being messaged by the Greek authorities that it did not want to encounter. So, yeah, Stephen, first let me get your feelings on the fact that, that we need safe routes into Europe, and then Ines, I'll come to you.
Okay. Well, look, generally, they're correct. There are not any strategic safe routes that come into Europe. I mean, we've had safe routes applied in the past, in 2014 to 2017. Germany under Merkel particularly allowed what was regarded as a safe route by allowing anybody that wanted to come into Germany at that time, and 1.25 million came in 2016 and 1.1 million came in 2017. The UK government had strategic safe routes which they worked with the UN for Afghanistan and Syria and have proposed a policy in their illegal migration bill. So generally, that's the rule. And that's why I believe there needs to be an international convention to start looking at the UN refugee meanings and definitions, and also include the potential for safe routes that can work. But when you start talking about safe routes, you're going to have to start considering the numbers that will come along. The EU reckons that last year there was 330,000 people came illegally into the EU. There also are deep concerns that if they allow safe routes, then you could get back up to the millions that came into Germany. So anybody that proposes safe routes will have to come up with numbers that they think are acceptable.
Ines, I guess the problem is here, though, and Stephen was saying this too, you have people who actually, their claims, for legal migration would actually be rejected outright. There were a number of Pakistanis on this boat, and Pakistan is not a country at war. Yes, there are economic issues like there are with many poor countries on the planet. So what needs to be done to deter the people that really have no legal claim to come to Western countries like Greece, like Italy, in order to deter them from coming? Or do you think they actually have just as much right to migrate as anyone else, even if they're fleeing war?
I think that here there are two questions. The first question is, obviously, I cannot comment directly on what are or would be the claims of people coming from Pakistan in this boat or other boats, because the examination of application needs to be done case by case. And the organization that I work for already have cases from people from Pakistan that should have received refugee status and would fit under the Geneva Convention. So I don't think we can do or cannot applicate a completely blank check that everyone coming from Pakistan will not have a claim under the Geneva Convention or under EU law. The second question is that, of course, probably will exist people that don't fit the definition of refugee status or international protection more broadly, but that cannot be determined a priori. That needs to be determined after an individual assessment of the case. And also to respond a little bit to what was said before, people use illegal, very unsafe, irregular routes because there is no legal and safe routes. Because if there was, I'm sure, and there are several studies that said this, that they will not use the smuggling networks. They will use the safe and legal routes.
Okay. Ines, that will have to be the final word. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us on this segment of The Newsmakers. Well, in Pakistan, dozens of families are lining up for DNA tests, hoping to help identify victims half a world away in Greece. Authorities there say at least 124 people on the boat were Pakistani, but other estimates put that number at closer to 400. And it appears the Pakistani passengers may have been singled out and forced below deck into the most hazardous part of the vessel. This week, the country flew their flags at half-mast to mourn those who died in the tragedy. And authorities in Pakistan have arrested a number of alleged human smugglers. But with the country mired in an unprecedented economic crisis with high unemployment, many Pakistanis feel they have little choice but to go abroad.
My son asked me this question before leaving. Tell me, Mom, how can I survive here? Baby diapers are very expensive, milk is expensive, I have no money to feed my children. And there are the electricity and gas bills. In each family, the young men are hopeless. They beg their parents to sell their homes and pay for them to go work abroad.
I talked to him a day before this incident. Then at night, he told me that the weather was not clear. I told him not to go on the boat, but he wouldn't listen to me and boarded the boat and said it was full of passengers. I said, then don't get on the boat. But he said, Mother, I leave you in the protection of Allah. Pray for me.
What happened to our brother shouldn't happen to anyone else. Human trafficking has been on the rise. It will not stop. The human trafficking agents who are arrested should not be released. They should be publicly punished so nobody dares to do such a thing in the future.
So why are migrants coming so far from Pakistan, a country that's not at war, and spending thousands of dollars to risk their lives to go west? Well, joining me now to help answer that is from Lahore, Sarfraz Khan Virk. He is the director of the Federal Investigation Agency. Thanks so much for being with us. Pakistani authorities have already arrested a number of suspected human smugglers over this tragedy. First, tell us more about that. How were they found? Who's been arrested?
So we have arrested around 17 main, the human smugglers, the agents who are involved in sending these people illegally abroad. And, they are the main people, and they usually book these people and then they send them illegally to first to the Libya, that is through the legal ways. They will get the e-visa for the Libya, and then from Libya, they will send them through the ship to the Italy, that is illegal.
Okay, but you are aware that some are saying these arrests right now are really just for show, and that it's only because potentially hundreds of people died, and that the government is doing anything to really actually anything substantial to address the real criminality behind this, that this is just a show of arrests in the immediate aftermath. What do you say to them?
So actually, they all are involved. So what we are doing is this matter has been taken up the highest level, at the national level. Daily, we have been conducting meetings, the Prime Minister and the Minister for Interior, and we are doing our maximum. Actually, what happened, the incident happened on 14th, and these agents, they were in knowledge of that thing that has happened, and they at the same time they hide themselves. So it was difficult for us. We are trying to hunt them, and in next few days, we'll arrest all those who will be involved in this incident.
Honestly, though, how powerful are the gangs and the mafias that these human smugglers are associated with and working with?
This is happening. This agent mafia, they are doing it for the last so many years. And they have a lot of success stories. I met many people, the parents of those victims, and they told me that they will be telling them the dreams of the good, rich life and all the stuff. So it's really a painful thing, and then they will not tell the authorities in Pakistan that we are sending them. They will not check what is happening, and only after the incident happens, then they come to us. And it's very unfortunate. Sometimes people will also come to us and they say that we want our second son to be sent abroad. We have lost one son, but we will be trying to send another son. So this is a painful story.
So why isn't there a better government campaign then to counter that misinformation, to let them know that this dream they're being sold by these criminals is not true, and that not only are they risking their lives, but they are risking years and thousands of dollars, which I'd also like to ask you about. I'm not sure how so many of the poorest people are getting that kind of money, but that's what they're putting at risk if they listen to these criminal gangs and these people smugglers. Why isn't the government better educating people on the ground to stop them from taking these risks in the first place?
Actually, what happens, many people, there is some specific areas. We have 3, 4, 5, 5 districts. The area, it's not about the whole Pakistan, it's just 3, 4, 5 districts. And they have success stories in every village. So in every village, there will be 2 people, 3 people who are already there in Italy. And their cousins, their family members, other family members, they all reached through this route. So they will be following that route, and they will think that they will also reach over there. What we are doing now is we have survivors right now. We are doing a lot on the media coverage and telling the people the stories of the survivors and also the victim families. They will not come to us before that, but no, we are telling the people that this is what they happened, and you can see the tears in their mother's eyes, how all this happened to her and how they will be living the rest of their lives. So what we are focusing now is sharing the stories and media coverage and involving the community and civil society. That will be the best way to counter this issue.
And what about the actual conditions as another way to counter this issue? Better providing for the poorest of the poor in Pakistan so that they aren't determined to leave their homes.
Actually, it's not related about, I'm telling you about maybe poverty and unemployment. There are some issues, but it's more related to the person who is in their family who has become rich, if he has reached to Italy and other areas of Europe, and other families who are not as rich, they would like to be, they would like that their sons should go there, and they want to be as rich as that family. So the issue is about, what I'm telling you, the issue is about 3-4 areas where the people who are already in Europe, most of them are in Italy and other parts, and they have reached through illegal means. So that is the way this attracts the other people on these areas.
Okay, Sarfraz Khan Virk. Unfortunately, that will have to be the last word for this edition of the Newsmakers. Thank you so much for being with us on the program, and thanks to our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.